The sound of a heart monitor screaming in sharp, panicked beeps sliced through the crowded hospital lobby like a blade. "Please, please, she can't breathe," the young black woman cried, her voice breaking as she clutched the wheelchair in front of her. "My mother needs help now." Her hands were shaking so badly that the worn strap of her purse slipped from her fingers and fell to the polished marble floor. She didn't even notice. Her eyes were locked on the man standing behind the triage desk, a doctor in a pristine white coat, his arms crossed, his jaw tight with irritation. "I said sit down and wait," the doctor snapped loudly, not bothering to lower his voice. "This is a hospital, not a charity line." The room went quiet. Patients lined the walls, some on stretchers, some seated, some standing, watching. A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. One woman lifted her phone slightly, pretending to text but clearly recording. A man near the vending machines shook his head and looked away. The young woman swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "Sir, I've been waiting for 2 hours. She's diabetic, her sugar dropped, and she collapsed this morning. I don't have insurance yet, but I'll sign anything." The doctor laughed, not a chuckle, a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed. "Insurance yet?" he repeated mockingly. "Let me guess, you forgot it or you never had it. Because people like you always have a story." Her face burned. "People like me?" He leaned forward over the desk, eyes cold. "Yes, people who show up demanding emergency care without paying, causing a scene, and expecting the rest of us to clean up their mess." A murmur rippled through the lobby. The woman's mother slumped further in the wheelchair, her head tilting to the side, lips pale, breathing shallow. The young woman reached out, cupping her mother's cheek desperately. "Mom, stay with me," she whispered, then turned back to the doctor, tears streaming freely now. "I'm begging you, just look at her." Instead of looking, the doctor waved toward security. "Either you sit down quietly," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "or you take her somewhere else. We don't tolerate disruptions." The word disruptions hit her like a slap. "I'm not disrupting anything," she sobbed. "She's dying." That was when the doctor raised his voice even more. "Enough," he barked. "Do you think shouting will magically make you a priority? There are rules here, and frankly, if you can't afford proper care, maybe you should have thought about that before today." The cruelty landed heavy in public. The young woman felt every eye on her, judging, measuring, deciding her worth in silence. Her shoulders curled inward as if she were trying to disappear inside her own skin. No one spoke up. No one moved, not when her knees buckled. Not when she grabbed the edge of the desk to keep herself standing. Not when a soft, terrified sound escaped her throat as she realized her mother's breathing had grown even weaker. And that's when the doctor delivered the final blow. "Security," he said again, louder. "Remove her. I won't have this kind of behavior in my lobby." A guard began to step forward. The young woman shook her head violently. "Please," she whispered, barely audible now, "please don't do this." Her humiliation was complete, loud, public, and merciless. Question of the day: have you ever seen someone judged or mistreated because of how they looked, what they had, or what they couldn't afford? Tell us in the comments what you think, and let us know where you're watching from today. The doctor straightened, clearly satisfied, already turning away as if the matter were settled. But he didn't notice what the audience did. Near the back of the lobby, beside a tall glass pillar, a man had stopped walking. He was dressed simply, no lab coat, no security badge, no signs of authority at all. Just a tailored dark jacket and calm, observant eyes. He had been on his phone when the shouting started. Now the phone hung forgotten at his side. His gaze wasn't on the doctor, it was fixed on the trembling young woman, and something in his expression changed. Recognition, shock, and then anger, quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. The guard took another step toward the wheelchair. The young woman closed her eyes, a single tear falling onto her mother's sleeve. And the man in the back took his first step forward. No one knew who he was. No one knew why his presence suddenly made the air feel different. But if the doctor had turned around at that moment, if he had seen the face of the man who had overheard every word, he would have realized just how badly he had misjudged the situation. Because that man wasn't just another bystander. He was the one person in that room who had the power to change everything. And he was done staying silent. Let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The day had begun long before the sun rose. A thin gray light seeped through the cracked window of a small, one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city, where sirens were as common as birdsong, and the walls carried the echoes of generations who had struggled just to stay afloat. Inside that apartment, Amina Johnson, 26 years old, was already awake. She lay still for a moment on the narrow mattress she shared with her younger sister, listening. The radiator knocked unevenly. A neighbor's baby cried through the wall. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed. The city never truly slept, but Amina had learned how to rest in pieces the way people like her always did. Carefully, she slid out of bed so she wouldn't wake Lena, her 14-year-old sister, who was curled tightly beneath a frayed blanket. Lena's school uniform hung from a hook on the door, freshly washed and carefully pressed the night before. Amina had stayed up late ironing it with meticulous care, as if neat fabric could protect her sister from a harsh world. In the kitchenette, Amina moved quietly, boiling water for instant oatmeal. There was no milk left. She added extra water instead, stirring slowly, stretching what little they had. On the counter sat a folded eviction notice weighed down by a chipped mug. She didn't open it again. She already knew what it said. 7 days. That was all they had left. Amina carried the oatmeal into the living area, where a thin woman lay on a fold-out couch beneath a pile of blankets. Ruth Johnson, her mother, once vibrant and strong, now looked fragile, smaller somehow, as if illness had been gently but persistently erasing her. "Mom," Amina whispered, kneeling beside her. "It's morning." Ruth's eyes fluttered open slowly. Her smile came late, but when it did, it was full of love. "Mina," she murmured, "you're up early again." "I always am," Amina said softly, brushing her mother's graying hair back. "I made oatmeal." Ruth tried to sit up, then winced, pressing a hand to her chest. Amina's heart tightened. "Easy," she said. "I've got you." This was who Amina was, steady hands, gentle voice, even when fear sat heavy in her chest. She had been like this since she was 15, since her father died suddenly of a stroke at a factory job that had offered no insurance and no mercy. Since then, Amina had learned how to be strong without ever being hard. She worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices at night, another at a daycare during the day, but it was never enough. Medical bills piled up faster than paychecks. Her mother's diabetes required medication they often rationed. Sometimes Amina skipped meals so her family wouldn't have to. Ruth noticed everything. "You didn't eat yet," she said quietly. Amina smiled easily. "I will later." It was a lie Ruth had heard many times. Lena shuffled out of the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Morning," she said, then froze when she saw their mother's face. "Mom, you don't look good." "I'm fine," Ruth said quickly, too quickly. Amina exchanged a glance with her sister. They both saw it, the pallor, the sheen of sweat, the slight tremor in Ruth's hands. "Lena," Amina said gently, "go get dressed. I'll walk you to the bus." As Lena disappeared back into the room, Ruth reached for Amina's wrist. "You don't have to keep doing this alone," she whispered. "You're too young to carry all of us." Amina swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm not alone," she said. "I have you, and Lena, that's enough." But even as she said it, fear crept closer. After Lena left for school, Ruth's condition worsened. Her words slurred slightly. Her hands shook harder now. Amina checked her blood sugar with the last remaining test strip. The number on the screen made her breath catch. "Mom," she said, trying to stay calm, "I need you to stay awake, okay?" Ruth nodded weakly, but her eyes kept drifting shut. Amina paced the room, phone pressed to her ear as she called clinics, assistance lines, anyone who might help. She was placed on hold again and again, listening to recorded voices apologizing for the inconvenience. Finally, Ruth collapsed. It happened quietly, no dramatic fall, no cry for help, just a soft sound as her body gave up and slid sideways on the couch. "Mom!" Amina shouted, catching her just in time. Panic surged through her. She tried to lift Ruth, but her mother was heavy and unresponsive now. Amina's hands shook as she called for an ambulance, only to be told the wait time could be over an hour due to overload. An hour they did not have. Amina grabbed her coat, her purse, and every scrap of paperwork she could find. With effort born of desperation, she maneuvered her mother into an old wheelchair borrowed from a neighbor months earlier. As she pushed Ruth out the door, Amina paused, looking once more at the apartment, the peeling paint, the eviction notice, the life she had tried so hard to hold together. She whispered a prayer under her breath, not for herself, but for her mother. Then she headed toward the hospital, carrying hope, fear, and love in equal measure, unaware that before this day was over, the world would finally see her not as a problem, but as a human being who mattered. By the time Amina reached the hospital doors, her arms felt like they were made of stone. Every push of the wheelchair down cracked sidewalks and uneven curb ramps had drained her strength, but fear kept her moving. Fear sharpened her senses, made every sound louder, every second heavier. The early morning air was cold and damp, clinging to her skin as if trying to slow her down. "Mom, stay with me," Amina whispered again for what felt like the 100th time. Ruth's head lolled to the side. Her breathing was shallow now, too shallow. Amina bent closer, listening, counting each breath like it was a fragile promise that might break at any moment. She burst through the sliding glass doors of the hospital just as a wave of antiseptic-smelling air rushed over her. The lobby was already crowded, stretchers lining the walls, anxious families clustered together, nurses moving briskly with clipboards and tired eyes. Hope flared briefly in Amina's chest. We made it, she thought. We're here, they'll help her. She rolled straight up to the triage desk, her voice trembling but urgent. Please, my mother collapsed. She's diabetic. She needs help right now. The nurse barely glanced up at first, fingers tapping on a keyboard. Name? She asked flatly. Ruth Johnson, Amina replied quickly. Her blood sugar dropped really low. She's not responsive. The nurse finally looked at Ruth, then at Amina. Her eyes lingered on Amina's worn coat, the scuffed shoes, the fraying edge of her purse. Insurance card. The nurse asked. Amina hesitated. We don't have active insurance yet, but I can pay something, anything, just please. The nurse sighed and handed her a clipboard. Fill this out and take a seat. How long? Amina asked, panic creeping back into her voice. Could be a while, the nurse replied, already looking past her. We're very busy. Amina wheeled her mother to a row of plastic chairs and sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly. She filled out the forms with shaking hands, struggling to focus as her thoughts spiraled. What if she stops breathing? What if I waited too long? What if they don't take her seriously? Minutes stretched into an eternity. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Ruth groaned softly, her fingers twitching. Amina leapt up. Excuse me, she called toward the desk. My mom is getting worse. She's not responding. The nurse glanced over, unimpressed. You'll have to wait your turn. Amina felt something crack inside her, not loudly but deeply. She sat back down, whispering prayers, rubbing her mother's hands to keep them warm. Around her, she noticed others being called, people who arrived after her, people with insurance cards ready, people who looked confident and calm. Each time a name was called that was Ruth's, Amina's chest tightened further. An hour passed. Ruth's breathing became erratic. Amina checked her pulse. It was weak. That was when panic fully took hold. Amina stood again, this time pushing the wheelchair straight back to the desk, her voice louder now, edged with desperation. Please, she said. She's getting worse. I think she's going into shock. That was when the doctor appeared. He stepped out from behind a swinging door near the triage area, tall, sharp-featured, with a white coat that looked untouched by the chaos around him. His expression was already annoyed, as if the day had personally inconvenienced him. What seems to be the problem here? Asked, his tone clipped. Relief flooded Amina's chest for half a second. A doctor, authority, help. She collapsed this morning, Amina explained quickly. She has diabetes and I think her sugar is dangerously low. She needs immediate care. The doctor glanced at Ruth briefly, too briefly, then he looked at Amina. Insurance, he asked. No, Amina admitted, but she's really sick. I'm begging you, his jaw tightened. We have procedures, he said. You can't just bypass triage because you're anxious. I'm not anxious, Amina said, her voice breaking. I'm terrified. She's my mother. The doctor exhaled sharply, as if her words were exhausting him. There are other patients, he said coldly, some with actual emergencies. Amina stared at him in disbelief. This is an emergency, he straightened, his voice lowering but hardening. Listen carefully. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I'll have security remove you. The word disturbance echoed in her ears. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably now. She could feel people watching, feel judgment crawling over her skin like ants. I'm sorry, she whispered automatically, though she didn't know why she was apologizing. I just don't know what else to do. The doctor said nothing more. He turned away. That was when Amina noticed her mother's head slump forward completely. Mom, she said urgently, tapping her cheek. Mom, no response. A cold wave of dread crashed over her. Help, Amina cried out. Someone please help us. Heads turned, whispers spread. That was the moment the doctor snapped, the moment that would later haunt him. His voice cut through the room, loud and sharp, filled with irritation rather than concern. Enough, you are not the only person in this hospital. Amina felt like she'd been slapped. Tears streamed down her face now, freely and uncontrollably. She's dying, she said, barely able to form the words. I can't lose her. But the doctor only saw an inconvenience, a problem. A liability. He motioned toward security. And in that instant, Amina understood the truth with horrifying clarity. She had no money, no influence, no one powerful to speak for her. She had exhausted every option. This humiliation, this public begging was her last door, and it was closing. As the guard began to move, Amina clutched her mother's hand tightly, pressing her forehead against it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried so hard. The ticking clock was no longer just time. It was her mother's life slipping away, second by second, in a room full of people who had chosen not to see. And with no escape left, Amina was forced to face the cruelest reality of all. Sometimes, desperation isn't loud enough for the world to care. The morning air had been cold when Amina left her apartment, but now, standing just inside the hospital's revolving doors, she felt strangely numb, as if her body had wrapped itself in shock to survive what her heart couldn't. This place was supposed to mean safety. Instead, it felt like a fortress. Before the confrontation erupted fully, before voices rose and eyes turned sharp, there had been a moment. A moment when Amina had paused at the entrance, hands locked tight around the wheelchair grips, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She remembered it clearly now. The glass doors had slid open with a soft mechanical sigh. Warm air washed over her, carrying the scent of disinfectant and coffee. People moved with purpose inside, doctors in crisp coats, nurses with badges swinging, patients escorted briskly down hallways. Amina had stopped just inside the threshold. This is it, she thought. Don't be afraid. She looked down at her mother then, at the once strong woman who had worked double shifts, who had raised two daughters on courage and prayer, who had taught Amina that dignity didn't come from money, but from how you treated people. "I've got you," Amina whispered, forcing strength into her voice, but fear walked beside hope with every step she took. As she pushed the wheelchair forward, Amina became acutely aware of herself, of how she looked, of how she might be seen. Her coat was clean but old. The hem was slightly frayed, the buttons mismatched from past repairs. Her shoes had lost their shine long ago. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but a few strands escaped, curling around her face. She told herself it didn't matter, yet her eyes kept flicking to others around her, people with designer bags, pressed suits, polished shoes, a man speaking confidently into his phone about meetings, a woman handing over an insurance card without hesitation. They belong here, Amina thought bitterly. I have to ask permission. Each step deeper into the hospital felt heavier, like walking uphill against an invisible force. Fear whispered to her in cruel, persistent ways. What if they don't believe you? What if they think you're exaggerating? What if they judge you before they ever look at her? Still, hope refused to die. Hope lived in small things, in the memory of her mother's smile that morning, in Lena's sleepy hug before school, in the belief that doctors were supposed to help people no matter what. As she waited during those long, unbearable minutes, Amina's thoughts drifted uncontrollably. She remembered being a little girl, sitting on this same hospital's steps years ago after her father collapsed at work. How she'd watched doctors rush past then, too busy to notice a scared child gripping her mother's hand. She remembered promising herself she'd never let her family face that kind of helplessness again. And yet here she was, helpless all over again. The waiting area felt hostile now, every cough, every beep, every murmur of conversation magnified by her anxiety. Time moved strangely, stretching and folding in on itself. She watched a nurse laugh quietly with a patient, watched a doctor reassure a worried husband with a gentle hand on his shoulder. They know how to be kind, Amina thought. So why not us? Her stomach twisted as she considered the possibility she tried not to name. What if my mother dies here? The thought was unbearable. Amina clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms, grounding herself in pain just to stay upright. She whispered another prayer, not eloquent or long, just a raw plea sent upward from the deepest place in her chest. "Please," she breathed, "just give us a chance." When the doctor finally approached earlier, before his words turned sharp, Amina had felt that flicker of hope again. The kind that blooms suddenly, foolishly, when you think help has arrived. She had stepped forward, straightened her posture, met his eyes with respect. And now, standing there as his tone hardened and the room's attention turned hostile, Amina realized something with crushing clarity. Hope can be dangerous, because when it's taken away, it hurts far worse than fear ever could. She glanced around the lobby again, seeing not faces but barriers. People who might have spoken but didn't. People who might have helped but chose comfort over courage. Still, she stayed. She stayed because walking away felt like giving up on her mother, because even humiliation was better than regret. When the doctor threatened to call security, Amina's knees nearly gave out. The entrance, those glass doors she had stepped through with such determination, suddenly felt impossibly far away. She imagined herself being escorted out, her mother still unresponsive, the world continuing on as if nothing had happened. No, she thought desperately, not like this. Her hands tightened on the wheelchair once more. She lifted her chin, tears blurring her vision, and took a shaky breath. Whatever happened next, she would not stop fighting. And as the doctor turned his back on her, convinced the situation was under control, Amina stood frozen in that moment, fear and hope locked in a painful standoff, unaware that her courage, witnessed by the wrong man, had also been seen by the right one. A man who had watched her enter, a man who had listened, a man who had recognized something painfully familiar in her quiet strength. And as Amina stood there, trembling but unbroken, the balance of this story was already beginning to shift, slowly, silently, toward a reckoning no one saw coming. The lobby felt impossibly large now, oppressive, every polished surface reflecting her smallness. Amina pushed the wheelchair closer to the triage desk, the soft wheels clicking against the tile in a rhythm that made her heart race. Every step she took drew the attention of the crowd, some curious, some indifferent, some openly judgmental. Their eyes felt heavy on her shoulders, weighing down the urgency that had carried her this far. The doctor straightened fully, noticing her approach. His lips curved into a thin, sharp smile, not friendly but predatory. "And here we go again," he said, his voice loud enough for nearby patients to hear. "Back for another scene, I see. Sit down, wait your turn." Amina's voice, strained and trembling, tried to carry both authority and plea. "Sir, I'm not here to make a scene. My mother, she needs insulin immediately. Her sugar is dangerously low. Please just look at her." The doctor leaned casually against the desk, crossing his arms, scanning her from head to toe. "I've seen plenty of people like you," he said, mockery dripping from every word. "Panicked, desperate, thinking that shouting or waving papers around will get you special treatment. News flash, it won't. Sit down or I call security." Amina's chest tightened. Her mother, slumped in the wheelchair, seemed smaller, more fragile under the weight of his words. Her pulse fluttered beneath Amina's fingers, uneven and slow. Every second that ticked by could be her last chance. "I am not asking for special treatment," Amina said, her voice cracking. "I'm asking for help. Please, she could die if we wait." The doctor scoffed and with a flick of his wrist dismissed her as if she were nothing more than a nuisance. "Do you understand that hospitals are for people who follow rules? You don't have insurance, you can't prove payment, you don't belong here, go home or leave now." A stifled gasp ran through the crowd. A man near the seating area shook his head. A teenager whispered to a friend, phone partially raised as if documenting the scene, yet no one stepped forward. The silence was deafening. Amina's hands shook violently now, gripping the armrests of the wheelchair. "You're killing her," she shouted, a raw, desperate cry that rang in the hall. "Do you hear me? She's dying and you're just standing there." The doctor's eyes narrowed. "Control yourself or I will have security escort you out. This is not a place for theatrics." The words hit harder than any blow. Theatrics, she thought. My mother is dying. How is this theatrics? She looked at the crowd, searching for a hint of empathy, a sign someone would intervene. Faces stared blankly, some shifting uncomfortably, others busy with their phones, recording silently but refusing to help. The humiliation swelled in her chest like a physical weight. "Sir," she pleaded again, tears streaking her cheeks, "I have nowhere else to go. Please just help her. I don't care about rules. I don't care about paperwork. Please just help." The doctor's lips curled into a smirk, his contempt sharp. "Rules are rules," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you can't follow them, maybe this isn't the place for you. Maybe people like you should reconsider when, where, and how to come begging for help." Amina felt herself collapsing inward, her dignity crumbling in front of the entire lobby. She glanced at her mother, whose breathing was shallow and labored, and realized the stakes were no longer abstract, they were literal. Life and death hung in the balance. Her voice dropped to a whisper, trembling with exhaustion and desperation. "Mom, stay with me, please stay with me." The doctor raised a finger, his tone venomous now. "Security, now we have a disruption, we cannot tolerate this behavior." A guard began stepping forward, authoritative, their eyes locked on Amina as if she were the criminal. The crowd continued to watch, some whispering, some filming, some turning their heads, pretending to be anywhere but here. Not a single person intervened. The humiliation, the exposure, the public judgment, it was total. Every sharp word, every sneer, every dismissive motion pressed down on her until it felt impossible to breathe. And yet, beneath the panic and fear, a small ember of defiance remained. It flickered when she looked into her mother's pale eyes, when she felt the slight movement of her trembling hand. This wasn't just about her. It was about her mother, about survival, about refusing to vanish silently in a world that had already judged her for being poor, for being black, for being powerless. Somewhere in the periphery, almost unnoticed, a man's gaze held her. Calm, observant, intense. He didn't move yet, but she felt it. Someone was watching, and it wasn't with judgment or cruelty. Amina didn't know it yet, but that quiet presence would soon become her lifeline. For now, all she could do was cling to the wheelchair, clutch her mother's hand, and meet the cold, unrelenting gaze of the man who was supposed to save lives, but instead had become the embodiment of every fear she had ever faced. Her humiliation was complete, her hope hanging by the thinnest thread, and the crowd's silence screamed louder than any insult. And as the doctor raised his voice once more, signaling the guard forward, the lobby held its collective breath, unaware that this moment, this pinnacle of cruelty and injustice, was about to be interrupted by a force they never expected. The guard's heavy boots clicked closer, and Amina felt the weight of every eye in the room press against her chest. Each step felt like a hammer striking her heart. She gripped her mother's frail hand, willing Ruth to stay awake, to fight through the weakness that was consuming her. But Ruth's eyelids fluttered, and each breath sounded shallower than the last. Amina's knees wobbled. The wheelchair's wheels scraped softly against the floor as she shifted, trying to brace herself, trying to keep from collapsing entirely. Her voice trembled as she spoke again, barely above a whisper, but it carried the desperation of someone clinging to the last thread of hope. "Please, please, someone help us." It was a plea, raw and stripped of all dignity. The lobby was silent. Every single person around her had chosen not to act. Some whispered to each other, some raised their phones to record, but no one stepped forward. No one made eye contact. The doctor's face was a mask of indifference. His arms crossed again, tall and rigid behind the triage desk. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. To him, she was nothing more than a nuisance, a disruption that needed to be removed. "You need to leave," he said again, his voice sharp, commanding. "I won't tolerate this behavior." Amina's throat tightened so much she could barely speak. "I am not doing anything wrong," she choked out, tears streaming freely down her face. "I'm just trying to save my mother." The guard stepped closer, his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair as if to forcibly move her. Amina's heart sank. She pressed herself closer to her mother, leaning over her, shielding her like a fragile treasure. The humiliation, the helplessness, the unfairness of it all threatened to crush her entirely. Every insult from the doctor, every judgment from the silent crowd, every skeptical glance, combined into a force more powerful than any physical weight. Her dignity, her confidence, her strength, they were all slipping away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she had no reason to apologize. "I'm so sorry, I just—" Her words dissolved into sobs. Ruth's head tilted to the side slightly, her lips barely moving as if she understood the hopelessness filling the room. Amina's hands shook as she brushed strands of hair from her mother's face, tears falling onto her mother's sleeve. The guard's shadow loomed over them. The doctor's voice grew impatient. The murmurs of the crowd blended into a dull roar in Amina's ears. It was deafening silence, a silence that screamed her insignificance, her powerlessness, her invisibility. And then, for the first time, Amina felt a deep, gnawing thought creep in. One she had never allowed herself to fully confront. Maybe we don't deserve help. The thought was terrifying, and yet it was the only explanation her mind could grasp in the face of such unrelenting cruelty. She had tried everything, pleaded, begged, explained, and the world still judged her unworthy. Her knees buckled beneath her as she bent over the wheelchair, clutching her mother tightly. She closed her eyes, swallowing sobs that felt like they would never end. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered, rocking her gently. I can't fix this, I ca." Her voice broke completely, trembling as if it were separating from her body entirely. Every ounce of composure, every layer of bravery, every bit of hope had been stripped away by the cold indifference around her. She considered leaving, running out of the hospital and into the streets, humiliated, exhausted, defeated. She imagined going home, not as a daughter fighting for her mother's life, but as someone crushed under the weight of a world that refused to care. But even at her lowest point, even when the tears blurred her vision and the weight of despair threatened to crush her lungs, Amina's heart refused to give up entirely. That small ember, the tiny flicker of stubborn hope she carried since childhood, still glowed faintly. It was hope that whispered, "Don't give up yet." It was hope that made her cling to Ruth's frail hand, refusing to let go. It was hope that kept her eyes open, even when the humiliation and silence felt heavier than any words. And it was at that exact moment, when all seemed lost, when she felt she had reached the very bottom of despair, that the air in the lobby subtly shifted. A presence she had not noticed before stepped closer. Calm, silent, intent. The man who had been standing at the back of the room, observing her struggle, slowly began to move forward. There was authority in his steps, a quiet power that contrasted sharply with the chaos and cruelty surrounding her. His eyes were fixed on Amina, not with judgment but with recognition. The guard and doctor did not notice him yet. The crowd remained oblivious. But somewhere deep inside, Amina felt it, though she didn't know why. Someone had seen her. Someone might finally act. And in that instant, just as despair threatened to consume every last piece of her spirit, the first thread of possibility appeared, a lifeline stretching toward her from the midst of the unyielding silence. The air in the hospital lobby was thick with tension, humiliation and fear so heavy that it almost seemed to weigh down the fluorescent lights overhead. Amina clung to her mother, tears still streaking her face, trembling under the cold indifference of the doctor, the approaching guard, and the silent, judgmental crowd. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the atmosphere shifted. From the back of the room, a figure stepped forward. Calm, measured, unhurried, yet each step seemed to carry a weight that demanded attention. The sound of his shoes against the tile was almost imperceptible, but somehow it filled the space with authority. He was tall, dressed simply in a tailored dark jacket, but there was something about his presence, quiet power, composed energy, that made the noise of the lobby fade. The crowd, already watching, instinctively parted just enough for him to move through, eyes following him. Amina, too consumed by fear and worry to notice fully at first, sensed it almost immediately. The tension in the room faltered slightly. The man stopped beside her and crouched down just enough to meet her eyes. His gaze was steady, warm, and unjudging, so different from the cold, sharp stares of the doctor and the murmuring crowd. "Ma'am," he said gently, voice low but clear, carrying calm authority, "I'm here to help." Amina blinked, startled, her sobs caught in her throat. I don't know," she began, but the words faltered. He shook his head slightly, a soft smile on his face. "It's all right, I see what's happening. We'll take care of her. I need you to step back for a moment, okay?" The doctor, sensing a challenge to his authority, straightened and frowned. "Excuse me, who are you? This is a hospital, you can't just—" The man's eyes shifted toward him, calm but unwavering. "I'm aware, but I'm asking you to step aside." The doctor's frown deepened, his voice rising with indignation. "Step aside, I'm in charge here, you have no authority." "I understand," the man said evenly. "I also understand that a life is at stake and that right now I'm asking you to act like a professional. Step aside, let's do the right thing." The words weren't loud or threatening. They were soft, deliberate, and carried a confidence that made the doctor falter, yet his pride, arrogance, and ignorance still held him in place. "I don't know who you think you are," the doctor began. "I'm not here to argue," the man interrupted gently but firmly. "I'm here to make sure a patient gets care. That's my only concern right now." Guard stepped closer, sensing a potential confrontation, but the man turned slightly, raising a single hand, and the guard paused mid-step, frozen. His calm authority was unmistakable, yet it carried no threat, only the clear message, "Do not cross me." Amina's breath caught in her throat. Her sobs had slowed slightly, her trembling hands gripping the wheelchair a little less tightly. There was something about this man, something in the way he carried himself, in the calm assurance in his eyes, that gave her hope. Real hope. Can you help her?" she asked, voice small and fragile. "Yes," he said simply. "I will, but I need you to trust me. Everything will be okay." The doctor, still unknowing of who this man truly was, laughed dismissively. "This is ridiculous. You don't belong here. None of you do. Step back or leave." The man's expression didn't change. He spoke again, calm, commanding attention without raising his voice. "You need to understand something very clearly. Right now, your attitude, your words, and your actions are dangerous. I am asking you professionally and firmly to stop this. You will not remove her. You will not belittle her. You will allow care immediately." The doctor's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. His confidence wavered, not because he recognized authority, but because there was something in this stranger's presence that made him uneasy. Amina felt the smallest flicker of relief ignite inside her chest. For the first time that morning, she dared to imagine that someone, anyone, might actually stand with her. Her mother's shallow breathing filled the silence between her and the stranger, and he turned his gaze toward Ruth for the first time. Kneeling slightly, he spoke softly, as if sharing a quiet promise. "Ma'am, we're going to help you. You're going to be all right." It was gentle, human, and filled with reassurance in a way that Amina hadn't felt all day. She pressed her forehead against her mother's hand, feeling that thread of hope grow, though she couldn't yet understand the full power of the man standing beside her. The lobby still held its collective breath. The doctor's arrogance had been challenged. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to murmur quietly among themselves. People shifted in their seats, phones lowered, eyes widening. Something in the air had changed, an unspoken tension, a subtle tremor that hinted the story wasn't going to end the way they thought. And yet the doctor remained defiant, unaware that the man beside Amina was more than just a kind observer. His true identity, the weight of his authority and influence, remained hidden, poised to reveal itself at the perfect moment. For now, the confrontation had paused. The storm of humiliation and fear that had battered Amina was met with calm. And in that calm, the balance of power began to shift ever so slightly toward justice. Amina clutched her mother's hand tighter. A small, fragile thread of hope threaded through the despair. The world had not abandoned her completely, not yet. The doctor's voice grew sharper, trembling with irritation now. "I don't know who you think you are telling me how to run my hospital." The man beside Amina lifted a single hand, palm open, his expression calm but resolute. "You still don't understand," he said evenly. "I am not here as a visitor. I am here because I have authority over this place. Authority you just challenged without knowing who I am." The doctor blinked, a flash of confusion crossing his face. "Authority? What?" The man straightened fully, his presence suddenly commanding the entire lobby. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his words filling every corner of the room. "I am a member of the hospital's board of directors. In fact, I'm the board member responsible for overseeing patient care standards. That means every policy, every procedure, every patient's well-being ultimately answers to me. And right now, I am telling you, you will not treat patients this way. You will not humiliate them. You will not deny care based on money, race, or status. And if you do, there will be consequences." The lobby went utterly silent. Whispers froze mid-word. Phones dropped slightly as the crowd realized they were witnessing a confrontation unlike any other. The doctor's confidence, so carefully cultivated over years, shattered in an instant. His jaw tightened. You can't." "Yes, I can," the man interrupted, his voice calm but final. "And you will." He gestured toward Ruth, still slumped in the wheelchair. "Ma'am," he said, turning his attention back to Amina's mother, "we're going to get you the care you need right now. No one will stop us, not him, not anyone else." The doctor's face flushed red, a mix of anger and humiliation. The crowd, once silent observers, now seemed to lean in, their whispers louder, judgment finally reversing. Many were recording the unfolding scene, some shaking their heads in disbelief at how quickly the arrogance of the doctor had been dismantled. Amina's mouth fell open. Her sobs had slowed, replaced by stunned disbelief. You're in charge here?" she asked, voice trembling. The man nodded. "I am, and no one, not even this doctor, has the right to make you feel invisible or undeserving. Not now. Not ever." The doctor opened his mouth again, but no words came. He looked around the lobby, finally seeing the cameras, the phones, the faces, all bearing witness to his cruelty. Every sneer, every insult, every moment of public humiliation had been documented. The realization struck him like lightning. His authority was gone. His arrogance had been exposed for everyone to see. The board member's eyes returned to Amina. "You've been through a lot today," he said gently. "I promise we're going to fix this, starting now." A wave of relief, so overwhelming it almost stunned her, washed over Amina. Her trembling hands finally unclenched. She looked at her mother, whose shallow breathing seemed to ease slightly under the promise of help. The crowd, sensing the full weight of the revelation, began murmuring again, but this time in awe and agreement. The silent witnesses who had been complicit through inaction now understood the gravity of what they had seen, and the magnitude of the injustice that had been right in front of them. The doctor's posture crumpled, his face pale. The arrogance, cruelty, and prejudice that had dominated the morning now seemed ridiculous, inconsequential, and entirely powerless. He looked around, trying to find someone to defend him, but there was no one. His reign of judgment had ended. Amina finally found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered, tears flowing freely again, but this time tears of relief, disbelief, and burgeoning hope. "Thank you for seeing us." The man nodded once, kindly but firmly. "No one should ever feel invisible when they are in need. Today that stops. Let's get her the care she deserves." As the nurse was called to immediately attend to Ruth, the entire atmosphere of the lobby changed. The tension that had suffocated the room vanished, replaced by a quiet sense of justice being served. People looked around at each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others finally meeting Amina's gaze with acknowledgement rather than judgment. And in that moment, Amina understood something profoundly human. Sometimes it takes a single person willing to act with courage, authority, and compassion to change the course of a life. The world hadn't been fair. The morning had been cruel, humiliating, and terrifying, but the right person, unseen until the perfect moment, had intervened. Her despair, once so total, now began to lift. Her mother would live. Her dignity, bruised but intact, could begin to heal. And the man, calm and composed, turned to face the doctor one last time. His gaze was steady, almost gentle, but unmistakable in its warning. Never again would cruelty and prejudice go unnoticed here. The lobby had witnessed a reckoning, and the morning's injustice had been overturned. Not through anger, not through confrontation, but through the quiet power of truth, authority, and compassion. The doctor, once towering with arrogance, now sat rigid in the small office adjacent to the triage desk, his confidence shattered. The board member, still calm and authoritative, had already begun documenting the morning's events. A review of security footage, witness statements, and patient records made it clear. The humiliation, prejudice, and denial of care were inexcusable. "You understand the consequences, correct?" the board member asked quietly, though every word carried weight. "This behavior is unacceptable. Patients' lives come first. Your actions today violated every standard, every protocol, and, most importantly, every moral obligation a doctor has toward a patient." The doctor's face had lost its color, his lips pressed into a thin line. I see." "No," the board member corrected. "You don't see, you ignored a human being in crisis. You refused care based on bias and your assumptions. That is not just negligence, it's disgraceful. You will be suspended immediately pending a full review, and termination is likely. The hospital's legal team will pursue all necessary action. There will be no shortcuts, no excuses." The doctor's eyes widened as the weight of accountability settled over him. For the first time that morning, he felt powerless. The hallway outside, where patients and staff had observed portions of the incident, now whispered quietly among themselves. The word spread like wildfire. Justice was being served. Meanwhile, the board member returned to Amina and Ruth. Nurses had rushed to attend to Ruth's condition. Her breathing stabilized under medical care, and her blood sugar was monitored meticulously. Amina clutched her mother's hand, tears still flowing but now mingled with relief and gratitude. "You saved her," Amina whispered, voice shaking. "No," the board member corrected gently. "You saved her. You acted when others did not. I simply ensured that her need was met." Amina looked at him, confusion and disbelief blending on her face. "I don't understand. Why are you helping us?" The man smiled softly. "Because no one should ever be powerless when life is at stake. Because dignity matters, because compassion is stronger than cruelty." Her mother's eyes, now more alert and responsive, met Amina's gaze. "Mina," Ruth whispered, her voice weak but steady. "I felt like I could, I thought." "You thought you were alone," Amina said, holding her mother's hands tighter. "I'm here, we're okay now." The board member watched the reunion quietly, giving them space, yet remaining nearby in case further intervention was needed. He spoke again, addressing the nurses and staff who had witnessed the morning's events. "This is a reminder to all of you. Each patient deserves respect, care, and dignity. No one is above that principle, no matter what assumptions you may make. Today, we were reminded that silence and inaction can be as harmful as cruelty." Over the next hours, the hospital shifted into a state of support. Ruth received the medication she needed, including proper insulin administration, fluids, and monitoring. Amina was provided with immediate assistance for hospital fees, ensuring no financial burden would block care. Social workers were contacted to arrange for longer-term medical support, housing assistance, and financial aid, addressing the precarious situation that had led to this morning's near tragedy. Amina sat by her mother's bedside, finally allowing herself to breathe fully for the first time all morning. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said, looking at the board member. "Don't thank me," he said, his tone firm but kind. "Thank the courage that brought you here. You were the one who fought for her life when everyone else ignored it. I merely made sure your voice was heard and acted upon." Her mother squeezed her hand, weak but steady. "God sent someone today, someone who saw you, Mina, someone who knew that love is stronger than fear." Amina swallowed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. The humiliation, the despair, the public judgment, it had all been overturned. Not by luck, not by chance, but because someone chose to act with authority and compassion. And in the quiet aftermath, Amina realized that the grace extended to them was far more than temporary care. It was a bridge to a future they hadn't dared imagine, a future where her family could survive, thrive, and never again be dismissed or demeaned when life and health were on the line. The board member lingered just long enough to ensure the hospital staff understood the lessons of the morning, then quietly stepped back, leaving Amina and her mother in a space filled with relief, hope, and the first real breath of safety they had experienced in months. "I can't believe this is happening," Amina whispered, wiping her tears. "After everything, after how he treated us, it's like the world finally sees us." Her mother smiled faintly, holding her daughter's hands. "It sees you now, Mina. And it always should have." The morning of terror, humiliation, and despair had transformed into a story of justice, compassion, and profound grace. And in that transformation, Amina felt something she had almost forgotten: the power of humanity when it chooses to act rightly, decisively, and with kindness. Years had passed since that morning, the morning that had begun in terror, humiliation, and despair. But for Amina Johnson, life had transformed completely. The weight of fear and judgment that once pressed down on her chest had been replaced with stability, purpose, and hope. Amina, now 32, walked through the sunlit hallways of a medical research center. Her steps were confident, her posture upright, and her eyes carried the quiet strength of someone who had faced the unthinkable and survived. Her hair was neatly styled, her clothes professional, her smile warm but grounded in a resilience born of experience. Beside her, Ruth, stronger than she had been in years, her health carefully managed, moved with ease, a lightness in her steps that only someone who had nearly lost everything could carry. And Lena, now a young woman attending college, walked ahead, excitedly recounting her plans for the day. Their family, once teetering on the edge of crisis, had been rebuilt with care, love, and opportunity. The board member who had stepped in that fateful day remained a figure in their lives, not just as a benefactor, but as a mentor and friend. He had helped them access long-term medical care, stable housing, educational opportunities, and financial security. But he had also taught Amina the invaluable lesson of her own agency, that courage and determination, even in the face of overwhelming odds, can change a life forever. Amina often reflected on the morning that had once seemed so hopeless. She remembered the fear, the humiliation, the silence of the crowd, and the sting of the doctor's prejudice. She also remembered the flicker of hope, the quiet strength in her heart that refused to surrender, and the presence of the man who had quietly shifted the balance from despair to justice. Now she used her experiences to help others. She had become an advocate for patients' rights, speaking at hospitals and community centers, teaching others how to navigate medical systems with dignity and persistence. She volunteered to mentor young women from underserved neighborhoods, showing them that their voice, courage, and humanity mattered, even when the world seemed ready to ignore them. One afternoon, while visiting a local community center, Amina watched a young girl clutch her mother's hand in fear, tears streaming down her cheeks. The girl reminded her so vividly of herself that day at the hospital. Amina knelt beside her, spoke gently, and offered a hand of comfort, whispering words that were equal parts guidance and reassurance. "Your voice matters," she said, "and no one has the right to make you feel invisible." The girl's eyes widened, and she squeezed Amina's hand tightly. In that moment, Amina realized the full circle of her journey. The pain she had endured, the injustice she had witnessed, and the grace that had changed everything had become a legacy. Compassion, courage, and humanity could ripple outward, touching lives she might never even see. The moral of Amina's story was simple, yet profound. Humanity is measured not by wealth, status, or power, but by kindness and courage in the face of injustice. Compassion can transform despair into hope, and one act of courage can change the course of a life. She looked at her mother and sister, at the lives they had rebuilt, at the community she was now helping to nurture, and she smiled, a full, unguarded smile. Life had not been easy, but it had become rich with purpose, connection, and meaning. And for every viewer watching this story, Amina had one final message: never underestimate the power of your voice, your courage, or your compassion. Stand up even when it's hard. Fight for yourself and for others, because sometimes the smallest act of hope can ignite the greatest change. If Amina's story moved you, share it with friends and family. Let it remind everyone watching that courage, kindness, and standing up for what's right can truly change lives. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove hope and compassion are stronger than any injustice.